and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is KJ Ricardo and today's video is a classic film review. I like to make film reviews every now and then, and this video is featuring the 1995 film Apollo 13. This film stars Tom Hanks as Jim Lovell, Bill Paxton as Fred Haise, Kevin Bacon as Jack Swigert, Ed Harris as Gene Kranz, Gary Sinise as Ken Mattingly, and Kathleen Quinlan as Marilyn Lovell. And of course, this film was directed by the wonderful Ron Howard. This week is the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 13 mission. So this happened April 11th through April 17th, 1970. And so 50 years ago was this successful failure for the Apollo space program. It was a heroic event in history. It was the 7th manned Apollo mission for America, and it was the 3rd attempt to the moon. This would be Jim Lovell's chance to land on the moon after being a part of the Gemini missions as well as the Apollo 8 mission. And so this was a big deal to him, and in the movie he acts the most like the protagonist. And so I just wanted to feature this movie because I think it's so well done. It's perfect in my opinion. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. I love the Apollo space program. I love studying it, and I'm very fascinated by space exploration. And so I think this is a perfect movie to watch for that. And so because of the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 13 mission, I just wanted to feature this movie. So this movie checks off so many boxes. It can appeal to so many people. It has history, science, space and astronomy, the Apollo space program. It has drama. It's a heroic tale, and it has a great sense of national pride. People unite and come together to solve this problem, to bring these men home. This movie gives you an exact perception of what it was like to be a part of the Apollo space program in the 1960s and early 70s, and to be a part of the Apollo 13 mission. It's just perfect. So the movie begins with the Apollo 11 moon landing. We see that footage. Everyone is watching the Apollo 11 moon landing. And for someone like me who wasn't alive back then, who didn't get to witness the moon landing, it's very fascinating to see the pride that America felt about man landing on the moon. And you can see that Jim Lovell wants to be the next person to land on the moon. So originally the Apollo 13 mission had Jim Lovell, Fred Haise, and Ken Mattingly. They were a perfect team, but the day before the launch, there was a measles outbreak, and Ken Mattingly has to be grounded, and so he is replaced by Jack Swigert, played by Kevin Bacon. This is intense. This is the day before the launch, and they're changing up the crew. They're changing up the entire team. The dynamics are going to be different. It's very intense. As the viewer, you can sense the tension. Everyone is unsure of how things are going to go. I think it's really interesting how the movie just didn't start right off with the Apollo 13 mission, with the launch and then the crash, the accident. It really delved into what goes on before a mission happens, what goes on with the astronauts, with their training and getting the family involved. I thought that was a really great storytelling, and so I love that. The launch scene is perfection. I am so fascinated with this launch scene. I think it's the best launch scene in any space movie. You have the music by James Horner, which is beautiful composition. Then you also have the anticipation of everybody down on the ground, the family. You have the engineers back in Mission Control in Houston. They're kind of watching from afar. And you have the astronauts. They are boarding this little rocket that's going to take them off into space. And there's so much tension. You can feel that. You can sense that as the viewer. You feel like you're in that rocket with them. And that is so riveting, and it's terrific directing by Ron Howard.
T-minus
15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Ignition sequence start. 3, 2, 1. Ignition.
Okay, guys, we got it. Come on, baby.
Everything's going well with this mission. It's fun. It's fun to watch them. It's really exciting until the oxygen tank explodes. And you have that famous line from this movie, "Houston, we have a problem."
Hey, we've got a problem here.
What did you do?
Nothing. I stirred the tanks.
Whoa. Hey.
This is Houston. Say again, please.
Houston, we have a problem.
But unfortunately, this is inaccurate dialogue with the actual transcript from the Apollo 13 mission. It was actually, "Houston, we've had a problem." And so that's a minor problem in the script. And so this becomes a story of survival. How the astronauts and the engineers back home at Mission Control can work together. How they can use their skills to bring everybody back home safe and alive to solve this problem. And this film is perfectly paced. From the astronauts fighting for their lives up in space to get back home, they want to get home. And then you have the engineers at Mission Control. They're trying to solve the problem, but they're kind of failing at it. And then you have the families, mainly Jim Lovell's wife, who they feel helpless and they're also very scared. The drama is different at each location in the movie and it's brilliant pacing. There are so many great scenes and individual lines in this movie. It captivates you and makes you feel like you want them to get home safely every time that you watch this movie. Even if you're watching it for the very first time and you know what happens because it's a historical film, you know they get back home, you're still wondering, are they going to get home? Because it is so intense. The tension and momentum of this film, it's so intense. You're on the edge of your seat while you're watching this movie, and that is good screenwriting, acting, and directing. So everybody involved in this movie just did a phenomenal job. The ending is perfect. When Mission Control is supposed to have heard back from the astronauts once they have entered Earth's surface and they're supposed to be back home now, and they hear silence. They don't hear anything. And they wait and they wait and they wait until finally they hear Jim Lovell's voice. The engineers jump up. The families back at their homes, they cry out. Everyone is so happy. And you, as the viewer, you shout out, you cry, and you are so happy that they got home too. And it's such a beautiful, powerful, climatic ending. It's just so great. Now, looking into the individual actors in this movie, Tom Hanks was perfect as Jim Lovell. He's the leader of the crew. He's the voice of reason for many of them. And because he's primarily the protagonist of the movie, a lot of it is on his story and his family. You really feel for him and his family during this movie, and you want him to go to the moon, but really you want him to come home safely. Bill Paxton as Fred Hayes, or Fredo as he's referred to in the movie, he was really great. He added more comedy. Some of his lines are really funny, and he was a really good sidekick to Tom Hanks in this movie. They worked together so well. Kevin Bacon as Jack Swigert, he was the underdog in this movie. He was the astronaut who wasn't even supposed to be a part of the mission. He was a part of the backup crew, but because of the measles outbreak, he had to join the crew. And it's actually crucial that he is a part of this crew because he is so talented at what he does. If they just gave him a chance, he has a very short temper with Fred Hayes, and this adds tension, but it was very important for Jack Swigert to be in that mission. Looking at Gary Sinise as Ken Mattingly, you feel bad for him because he was grounded. He really wanted to go to the moon, but he becomes very intricate towards the ending of this movie. He's the only one who figures everything out. He solved the problem with the re-entry plan because he was an astronaut. He was the only one who knew what it was like to be inside a rocket. He is an astronaut, and so he had a different mindset than the engineers, and this saved the men. And then Ed Harris as Gene Kranz. He has my favorite lines in this movie. Failure is not an option. I love that line. And so many other lines that Gene Kranz has. I am so captivated by him. He was the flight director, so he was the authoritative voice at Mission Control. He wants to bring the men home, and he believes that they will come back. And a powerful moment at the end when he finally sits down, there are tears in his eyes because it actually worked. This was a successful failure, and Ed Harris did a phenomenal job in this role as Gene Kranz. He was so good. And then finally, looking at Kathleen Quinlan as Marilyn Lovell, she's definitely a supporting character, but she's also important. She's Jim's home, and she represents the fear that astronaut wives had, and so you really had to have her be an essential part to this movie. Finally, I want to look at Ron Howard and his directing, and it was spot on. It's amazing for me to think about that little Obie Taylor from the Andy Griffith Show, that he grew up to direct this perfect film. He wasn't even nominated for an Academy Award for directing, which is unbelievable to me. In my opinion, this is Ron Howard's finest film. He definitely should have been nominated, and he should have won the Academy Award for directing because everything about this movie is perfect. He had so much close attention to detail, and this is an awesome epic movie. You don't see many movies like this, and so Ron Howard did a great job as the director of this movie. Overall, I rate this movie a 10 out of 10, an A+. I have no complaints about it. I have nothing to criticize about it. I think it's a perfect film. In my opinion, this is one of the best movies of all time. It's definitely one of my favorite movies, which is why I am talking so much about this movie. I could talk so much about this movie because I just think it's perfect. I am really fascinated by the Apollo space program. I think it's so important. I think it was a really special time in American history where the whole country came together to see if man would go to the moon, and the engineers and the astronauts, they formed a brotherhood, and it was just so exciting. And so I love that time period, and so I love this movie because it was an exact representation of what it was like back then. And so it's climatic, it's powerful, and it's everything you want in a good movie. And so if you have never seen this movie, I definitely recommend watching it. It's an experience that you won't regret. It's a powerful, wonderful movie, and it's a great story. And that's it. That's all I have for you in this video. I hope you enjoyed this review, this commentary about this movie. I know I talked a lot about the movie, but I just am really fascinated about it. I get really into this movie and I could talk a lot about it. And so I hope that you enjoyed my review, hearing my thoughts. I want to hear from you. Do you like this movie? What do you like about it? I would be really happy to hear your thoughts. So put that in a comment and I would be happy to read that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. To conclude this video, I decided to put together a compilation of some more scenes that I didn't feature in the review. There are so many scenes to watch from this movie that are just so captivating. So I decided to put them together at the end of this movie so you can just watch and you can get a sense of what this movie is about, and maybe you'll go watch it. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. I'll see you guys next time. And instead of saying, remember to always laugh often, I'm going to say, failure is not an option.
Capcom, let's have them close reactant valves.
13, this is Houston. We want you to close react valves on cells 1 and 3. Do you copy?
Are you saying you want the whole smash? Closing down the react valves for fuel cells shutdown? Shutting down the fuel cells. Did I hear you right?
Yeah, they heard me right. Tell them we think that's the only way they can stop the leak.
Yeah, Jim, we think that closing the react valves may stop the leak.
Did he copy that?
Do you copy, Jim?
Yes, Houston, we copy. We just lost the moon.
Well, fortunately, we're not landing on the moon, are we? I don't care what anything was designed to do. I care about what it can do.
So let's get to work. Let's lay it out.
I want this mark all the way back to Earth with time to spare. We never lost an American in space. We're sure as hell not going to lose one on my watch. Failure is not an option.
I know what the problems are, Henry. This could be the worst disaster NASA's ever experienced.
With all due respect, sir, I believe this is going to be our finest hour. Gentlemen, it's been a privilege flying with you.
Odyssey, Houston, do you read? Hello, Houston. This is Odyssey. It's good to see you again. Welcome home. We're glad to see you.
Houston, we're at Stable 1. The ship is secure. This is Apollo 13 signing off. Good job.
And as for me, the 7 extraordinary days of Apollo 13 were my last in space. I watched other men walk on the moon and return safely, all from the confines of Mission Control and our house in Houston. I sometimes catch myself looking up at the moon, remembering the changes of fortune in our long voyage, thinking of the thousands of people who worked to bring the 3 of us home. I look up at the moon and wonder, when will we be going back? And who will that be?